Yeah, if I could, I wanted to ask about your sense of how this AI boom or bubble will play out, and kind of along the lines of how you feel about like maintaining jobs in face of a technology that could greatly impact the jobs. There's a sense where, as a general purpose technology, also, it's like you get the electricity in your business, and how much is that really some company or like a bunch of startups or a bunch of businesses all trying to get into the market, and how much of that is just OpenAI or Microsoft just feeding you the electricity, and then businesses that already exist
Sure.
boom that way. Just interested in how you see this kind of playing out, and I guess like as it gets closer to like a general intelligence or a set of capabilities that can just replace all of our work. It's like if that's nearby or further away, like how we move up towards that, and how that all plays out.
Yeah. Really.
Thanks for all of this.
Anytime. Yeah, these are really good questions. So I actually think your question hits a lot on the head, and kind of the key point of this, which is, will the infrastructure layer beat the app layer? And the answer to that is almost never no. If you look back in history, the app layer always wins. So if you look at hardware in general, other than NVIDIA, hardware has generally kind of been a disaster for tech over the long periods of time, where Microsoft and Google have sort of won on the software side. Obviously, Apple's is its own story too, but you generally win on the app layer, not the app software layer, not the infrastructure software layer. So the only company that's maybe notable on the infrastructure software side is Oracle and a handful of other infrastructure companies. But it's the actual app that wins. So much of the infrastructure side is open source or stuff that could be made open source, and there's no real great way to attack that with a commercial interest. Whereas on the app side, you can build a brand, right? You can build a Microsoft Excel. Nobody really cares about building a brand around an LLM. It's like, okay, this is the architecture that works. We're going to use this architecture, and that's it. The same way you don't think too hard about like provisioning a web server. And if somebody tried to make you pay for like web server code or something, you would immediately say, no way, I'm using Apache or I'm using Express or something like that. So the software side and the infrastructure side is, I think, very, very ephemeral and like hard to monetize. And obviously, OpenAI has an API. They're making some money on that. But I actually think most of the money they're going to make is on ChatGPT. And that's an app layer, right? So they're kind of doing both. But I think the commoditized LLM is not going to be a great business. I think the people that take that LLM, and whether they point it to their own business and say, how do we become more efficient? Or they make a business out of it and charge people to use lawyer in a box, doctor in a box, accountant in a box, you name it, that LLM could provide. Those are brands that can last and build, and people can use them like TurboTax or Excel or any of the other great software brands we know and love, Google. But you notice that none of the actual kind of infrastructure layer ever makes money in software. Hardware is obviously a different story. It's kind of, like I said, pretty mixed. You've got winners and losers, but ultimately I think software on the app layer is the highest margin, longest persistence, stuff like that. So I think those will be the companies that win. And the only real software that we've seen out of LLM so far is ChatGPT. So I think there's some time to carve out niches and win and compete. In terms of how the bubble actually plays out, it's very interesting. Tech caused a big reckoning in the crossover and hedge fund world for investing in privates. So I think that we'll see the same beginning of the bubble, which is venture funds chasing valuations and stuff like that. But I think the exits will be IPOs. And I think that, again, I don't have a crystal ball, I could be wrong here, but I think we will see like $5 billion, $1 to $10 billion kind of IPOs of AI companies with no revenue or limited revenue. And I think people will be okay with that. Now, remember in the tech bubble of 99 and 2000, it wasn't so much the large market caps, it was actually the number of $1 to $5 billion market caps. That there were a bunch of fly-by-night companies that went up and then went down, and that was it. You also saw a generic boom in tech valuations because of the internet, and you had stocks that didn't have much like exposure to the quote-unquote internet, and they still would go from like 15 or 20 times earnings to like 60 or 70 or 80 times earnings. Microsoft is actually fairly good describer of that. Actually, all they had at the time was Office and Windows, and neither one was really particularly levered to the internet, but their valuation quadrupled anyway. So, I think that I think people will be a little more rational about AI benefiting kind of all these companies, but you do see some of this starting to play out in the markets. Like Adobe's released an AI product. Microsoft obviously is going to be very exposed, but it'll be interesting to see other companies kind of try to get there. The problem is so much of these companies already sort of have this expectation that they'll deploy this new technology, how much it'll actually increase revenue and things like that. If we see real increases to revenue, like an extra 10% revenue a year or something like that, we will get a big bubble in every tech stock. But I don't know if we're going to actually get that, or we're going to see cost reduction, which the market's a lot less kind of excited about. So it's sort of a conundrum. Like, for there to be a bubble, there has to be asset prices that inflate. For their asset prices to inflate, there has to be assets with prices to begin with. And there's a boom. I mean, I've started a new AI product, and other companies, are being started by the day. I'm sure like 100 AI companies just started and got incorporated today. So everyone's going to try to take advantage of this boom, including the investors who will put money into this stuff. But then the investors have to turn and put the hot potato somewhere else. And I think the stock market is probably more likely this time than the last several times where it was like these mega funds, SoftBank, hedge funds like Tiger. A lot of these folks are once burned, twice shy, and I think the public markets will be the place to sort of put all this merchandise. Sol?
Yeah, so I have actually several questions because I really got it late, but basically the first one is that, have you heard of like Bloomberg GPT? Like I can actually send the archive link in the chat. The second question is that, what do you think I've listened to some of your lectures on finance and everything, but I'm just wondering, since my actual education and background is in neuroscience and computer science, as a person who is has interest in finance, would getting a CFA would it be a productive use of my time to give me some, let's say, business legitimacy in case I basically go down that path, whether it's as a founder or as a venture capitalist in the future, since you have experience in the field? And thirdly, which is one of the most important questions that I have, is basically considering that you mentioned that lawyers and prosecutors are selfish psychopaths, which I completely agree with you. Most of them are, and also considering that there is a straight pipeline from